Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming new moon taking place on the 22nd of May in the sign of Gemini, more specifically at around 2 degrees of the sign of Gemini. Now, like all new moons, this one represents a very powerful new beginning in that area of our lives where 2 degrees of Gemini falls into, but of course, new beginnings are also susceptible collectively, they may be also playing out on the world stage. But unfortunately, as there are so very many different types of energies in the sky, while this new moon phenomenon occurs, it is very difficult to tell with great precision how this can play out in our lives individually, because this can be so very different for so very many people, because there's also a karmic element to attach to this, and there's also our own attitudes to life, and most importantly, how we are going to be feeling. Feelings are a big keyword here because at around the time of the new moon, the ruler of this new moon, Mercury, being in its home sign of Gemini, is going to form a very tight conjunction with Venus retrograde, also in this part of the sky, and both of them are going to be holding a square with Neptune. Now, when Neptune is involved in this picture, especially as a hard aspect, a square, now this can definitely spell confusion. This can spell that we are being suffocated, drowned by those very powerful emotional Neptunian vibes. So the heart and the heart space may not exactly be our greatest ally in this present moment, but around the time when the new moon takes place, this can be a little bit different because Mercury, the planet of the mind, communication, our rational functions, is together with Venus. So this represents that we are going to be trying our very, very best to rationalize, to make sense of everything. And if Venus represents matters of the heart, our desires, our emotional needs, our feelings, how we feel towards other people, how we feel towards everything in life, basically, the presence of Mercury here adds a very powerful and much needed element of rationality, where it's not just about our hearts taking us wherever it desires, but this is where also we have to ask our minds, our rationality, if all of this is in our highest good. And if it is, then we have to find practical, rational, logical means to get there. But this isn't very easy to accomplish because, after all, both Venus and Mercury are holding that very strong square with Neptune, and that can represent our illusions, that can represent our idealism, and most importantly, since Mercury and Venus are so tied together and the power of the square is also very much exact, that represents that we're also going to be having like an attitude where we see what we want to see, where our fantasies, our deep desires are guiding us more than anything. And this is where, whatever we may desire, whatever may be so very strong in our hearts and in our psyche, might not always be extremely healthy, might not always be possible when we desire it. And there's so many compromises that life requires us to make to get what we desire. And this is exactly why the rationality, the power of our logics, has to be a dominant force here. Because on its own, it's not that dominant, because Neptune is the key power player here. So it is very suffocating, very drowning emotional energy. But a square ultimately is a hard aspect, but it is also the power of motivation, the power of ambition. This is where we are actually given a chance to transmute all these confusing feelings, our most obsessive desires, and what we want to see in life. We have the power to transmute it into ambition, where that fuels us, but we know rationally that right now or at the time of the new moon, we have to work towards whatever we want to accomplish, and working towards this, the very first step in order to enable this is to have a plan, is to have social connections in our lives, and ultimately to believe in ourselves, to believe in our dreams, to support our heart space, basically, where rationality doesn't necessarily have to make things that much complicated, because accepting the truth that the heart, the feelings, emotions, whatever we love doesn't need a very specific reason, and if we just accept this, if we just go with the flow, but the flow of rationality and not illusions, not allowing our most intense desires, dreams, our ideals, our fantasies to drown us and ultimately devour us now, can represent the very best attitude, the right thing to do in order to turn this new moon to our greatest advantage. Because the most positive expression of this is actually if the heart and mind, as in Mercury and Venus together in this dual sign of Gemini, work together in perfect harmony. They do not battle themselves, they do not stand from a place of conflict and contradiction. Well, then that is already a massive inner empowerment, where that Neptune might have no choice but to turn into its most positive expression, as in faith, as in patience, as in just being aligned with our, deepest desires, but not necessarily stressing ourselves and slave driving ourselves in order to accomplish them there and then. So ultimately, the most positive manifestation of this energy is where the heart, Venus, and the mind, Mercury, function in perfect harmony, and this is where the square with Venus can represent a very profound spiritual power, where our faith and beliefs do not drown us, but rather they fuel the harmony of the mind and heart, and that is a massive blessing. But a blessing which isn't offered to us that freely. We have to work for it mentally, emotionally. We have to do the inner work. We have to stay aligned, and we have to hold the frequency, basically, because the frequency of our thoughts, even the lower mind, even the chitter chatter of our minds, has to be kept disciplined, has to be kept under well functioning parameters. We are not allowing the contradictions and the chaos of the mind and the worries and overthinking to get to us. This is where we have to be like the total sovereigns of our mental spheres, but also the heart. Where a state of inner peace, a state of greater serenity has to be provided by us. And if this is accomplished, then even the power of this very strong square can turn to our advantage, because we are fueling our plans and desires with our faith, and not allowing this basically holy trinity, because that is what it is: the mind, Mercury, Venus, the heart, and Neptune, the higher self, the source, descend into chaos, but rather this is where we unite them, and this is where we can get the very best energy of what Gemini represents, because ultimately Gemini is two in one, and when those two elements, even if they represent the opposite side of the spectrum, work together and support each other, well, then that also represents the mental energy, the mental power, the fertility of the mind of two people in one. Even though Venus is very uncomfortable in the dual sign and energy of Gemini, her most positive expression can be that we are our own best friends, we are our own supports, we are our own healers, our own psychologists, basically, our own mentalists, So that is a very profound energy of self-empowerment, just that we have to, work with the energy of Gemini, which is free, which is non-conformistic, which is very mutable and adaptable. It is never rigid, so we always need to go with the flow. Whereas in 1 minute, maybe we're focusing on one big idea, one ingenious thought that we have, but if the next minute something totally new enters our sphere, well, we have to work with this. We have to have this mutability, this adaptability to just jump from one subject onto the other, to work together with our minds and hearts. But nothing which I have said until this present moment has anything directly to do with this new moon. This is just the background energy, basically, the other celestial conversation which is taking place simultaneously. So now let's focus a bit more on the actual new moon and the aspects it's going to be holding. And the very first aspect is actually a very positive one, because it is a trine, a celestial conversation of supreme harmony held by this new moon and Saturn from fellow air sign Aquarius. Now, this is a rather beautiful energy because Saturn is the symbol, basically, of physical reality, and since it has to do with two air signs, Aquarius, its ancient ruling sign where it is in the present moment, and also it speaks with the sun and moon in fellow air sign Gemini. So both of these energies represent the mind. It can represent reality, realism, a very down-to-earth approach. And ultimately, since the new moon is a powerful new beginning, this can be a celestial help, where not only is the help coming in the form of, like inspiration, guidance, and all of that, but this can also represent actual help, for example, from another person, because Saturn in Aquarius represents society, social connections, solidarity, humanitarianism, the power of the masses. So when there is a vulnerable person, the power of the masses, when many people join forces, they can actually offer very significant help. So this can indicate that, for example, this new beginning can take the shape and form of like something you wanna do on the internet, like a project, a business idea, or just finding solutions to your most urgent problems online, or with the help of a specialist, with the help of a very experienced professional. Saturn is the symbol of professional, of a very experienced person, of a teacher, of an elder, of someone with great influence. So this can also play out this way, where the internet, interhuman connections, your circle of friends, for example, the place you have in society, in your local community, for example, all of this can represent a very powerful help, guidance, maybe just an idea, someone helping you, someone promoting you, someone, this can also represent mouth word, because Gemini is all about communication, and Aquarius is society, interhuman connections. So if you're very good and skilled and talented at something, this can definitely represent your notoriety growing, you getting more influence, people talking about you and your skills, your talents, what a good professional you are. So this can play out in so very many different ways, and usually this is like a free blessing. So fantastic new beginning can actually be based on something you've done in the past, maybe humanitarian type of work, charity work, helping someone, a group of people, or so, anything like this unconditionally. So everything that you have done in the past, because Saturn requires action, work, effort, sacrifice, everything like that, that can also be enter your life as a massive karmic reward, for example, which will enable your new beginning. It can also represent, for example, the success of something, for example, a project, a business idea you started in the past, but it just, either it didn't work out or it's stagnating or something like that. It can revive that, it can add a lot of power and karmic charge to it, and it can enter reality in the following 6 months, for example, because that is the sphere of influence of a new moon. But of course, Aquarius and Gemini are very futuristic signs, especially Aquarius, so this can represent something totally new, where maybe an opportunity or something enters your life out of the blue unexpectedly, but it still is based on your reputation or your personal power or your expertise or your experience, because that is a very Saturnian way to go about this. Now, a totally different way of looking at this energy can represent where obstacles that blocked your path until this present moment are being lifted from your life, so that is also a massive blessing, especially if those obstacles really blocked you and you tried everything in your power to overcome them, to find solutions, to find other, means to go about things, but it just didn't happen. And if this energy all of a sudden, Saturn, lifts those obstacles as if by magic, well, then you don't need any more blessing because you have everything else you need to just start working or start doing whatever you wanted to. But of course, since Gemini is a very mutable energy, it can also represent readaptation, where that Saturn just gives you the sense of realism, what you need to do in order to change and readapt your plans or whatever you needed to accomplish, and this new format that you're going to invent, because Aquarius is the ingenious type of energy, so it requires a lot of brainstorming, and if you find the most appropriate means to enable your ideas, well, that is also a massive blessing, a blessing which ultimately leads to a powerful new beginning. As I said earlier, the sphere of influence of a new moon is 6 months after. But chances are this one can be quite hasty and quick, because it's air energy and Mercury is in its home sign while this new moon takes place. That also adds a little bit of speed to it. And the North Node in the sign of Gemini, well, that is also the energy of quickness, the energy of very hasty change, celerity, and of course even quantum leap in some cases. Especially if you are a kind of person who is experiencing a North Node return, for example, or it can be something like a big opportunity entering your life, unexpectedly maybe, but it might require some kind of compromise. But of course, this isn't just about, future ideas, plans, goals, what you want to accomplish. The sign of Gemini rules friendships, for example. It is one of the most appropriate energies to form new social connections, make new friends, meet new people, get inspiration, positivity, lightheartedness into your life. So this energy is absolutely perfect if you are a person looking for new friends, new social connections, people who you resonate with, if you want to share ideas, if you need inspiration in your life, but inspiration in the form of a person, in the form of communication, for example, writing, starting a new blog which can, for example, connect you to like-minded people. Even if you are someone who is looking for new hobbies, spare time activities to add a touch of fun and lightheartedness into your life, this new moon is really, really good for all of that. Also, if you're someone who's looking for new studies, for example, learning something new, new skills, or mastering certain skills that you have, or taking a totally new approach to something that you have already learned, well, this can also be a really good energy, because Saturn is the teacher, the symbol, the experienced person who is transferring their experience, their wisdom, their knowledge someone who needs it. So all of this is very likely to take place one way or another because Saturn is so very involved in this picture. But even if we just disregard the manifestation, this is also the energy of grounding, mental grounding, grounding in reality, realism, very, very down to earth. So, this is also a very, very profound celestial help, basically, which gives us the means and the chance and the energy, the determination, the ambition, and the power to navigate through that previously said hard aspect between Venus conjunct Mercury and Neptune. If we need to make any decision or take a compromise or think things through very profoundly, in order to give ourselves the sense of security that we are not making a mistake, for example, that this new beginning, if that is how it plays out, is not leading us to something that we do not really wish to experience. So, this energy counters the illusionary, the idealistic, the naive vibes of that Venus Neptune square. But of course, this isn't just it, because there's another hard aspect taking place in the sky, and this is connected to this new moon. Yes, it's not exact, it is not like a very dominant energy, but it can still be seen as a requirement, maybe a karmic requirement, in order for this fantastic new beginning to take place in our lives. And we are talking about the new moon squaring Mars in Pisces. Now, Mars in Pisces is very uncomfortable on its own because Pisces is basically like a prison for Mars. It drowns its fire, its passion, its quickness, its spontaneity, but it is a really good energy to heal the past, for example, to be honest with ourselves emotionally, to be honest with our own feelings, to dig deep inside our inner world, our subconscious, our repressed emotions, and especially if anything was left behind, uncompleted, unfinished from the past. Mars is really, really powerful for everything that has to do with our own psychology, especially things linked to the past. But at the same time, Mars in Pisces is a really good spiritual power. It is the power, the strength of our faith. It is the singularity of our spiritual desires, what we wish for ourselves in a very, spiritual way. For example, if our main goal in this period is just to find a little bit of happiness, just to find a little bit of peace, a little bit of comfort emotionally, well, that is, for example, like a spiritual purpose because it has so much to do with what happiness and all of that means for us personally. So we might have to crystallize this in ourselves, in our psyche, first of all, and then it can turn into an ambition, into a spiritual goal, and it can work together perfectly with this new moon. But for example, another way that this can play out, if we desire new connections, new friendships, even a new relationship or anything like that, well, first of all, we have to close the chapters to the past. We have to heal ourselves. We have to become aware of where exactly we're vulnerable, where exactly do we still hurt, so that we do not make the mistakes of the past, or we do not allow the past to shackle us. We do not allow our traumas or hurts to shackle us, because that is the condition for a new beginning, especially regarding friendships, new social connections, new people in our lives. Or a totally different way of looking at this, if we need a void to be filled in our hearts, where first of all it has to be decluttered. There has to be a proper empty space in our hearts, not just a big pile of mess. Because when we invite another person into our hearts, we have to make it like a clean and like sacred temple so they can feel comfortable in there. This is one way this square between Mars and the new moon can manifest. But at the same time, it can also simply be that we need to fuel this new beginning, the seeds of our intentions, our desires, whatever we're planting into the universe, especially mentally, because Gemini, we have to fuel it with belief, we have to fuel it with faith, we have to fuel it with our emotional strength, because we add to it, we feed it, we nurture it, and then of course it grows into a beautiful flower bearing fruit. But of course there's also a very bad way to go about this energy, where if we allow all the information from the internet, for example, that square between Mercury, Venus and Neptune can represent bombardment of information and fake news and dramas and fears from the internet, and then they confuse us, they send us into a state of unknowingness, where we don't even trust ourselves, we don't even trust our own minds, because we're so overwhelmed with information. So this can also represent that we need to detach, we need to, limit the amount of information that reaches our hearts and our minds, most importantly, because this is where we have to have some kind of clarity, or we have to be in tune with realism, reality, whatever it means for us. So for some people, this Mars in Pisces can represent an inner call to embrace for a few days, maybe few hours, sacred solitude, and just contemplate, just feel things through very profoundly. The squares are always hard aspects, they're uncomfortable, they can be frustrating, but ultimately they're not rigid and fixed. There is always a chance and an option for us to turn them into something else, mostly into motivation, inner power to fuel us to accomplish whatever we desire. And last but not least, there's also an energy in the sky which has absolutely nothing to do with this new moon, but it's still very powerful, and we're talking about the sextile held between Mars in the sign of Pisces and Uranus in the sign of Taurus. Now this can be divine guidance, this can be massive epiphanies, soul level realization, where some emotions, memories, information that we repressed just comes to the surface, enters our awareness instantly, unexpectedly, in a flash of a moment, but that ultimately also bears the opportunity for us to quickly, instantly process it, hold our truth, hold a very objective, a very detached perspective, vision, because basically Uranus, especially in an earth sign, is objective reality. It is the cold, hard sword of truth, but objective truth, as objective as it can become for a human being. So this can be a very quick, very instantaneous, sudden, unexpected energy, which can offer us a lot of clarity, a lot of new ideas, epiphanies, solutions. It can evoke the most ingenious aspect of our beings. Just that this isn't just a mental energy, this is also an emotional, a psychological energy, because Mars is in the sign of Pisces, so it has so much to do with our psyches, with our maybe spirituality, our faith, our past, our distant past, even past lives. And a totally different way this energy can manifest whenever Mars and Uranus speak together in conversations like the one we have right now. Well, that can represent, when dreams, fantasies, whatever we focus on, can just come into reality unexpectedly, outside our sphere of control, of course, because Uranus is chaos, it is hazard, it is chance, but it can still enter reality one way or another. For some people, quite symbolically, but for other people, quite literally, quite directly. So whatever we fantasize about during this time, whatever we dream about, whatever we wish and desire can unexpectedly just manifest before our eyes, bringing a shock, surprise, delight into our lives. But of course, this energy can also revive the past, where, for example, a relationship, a friendship, maybe something that we abandoned long ago, can suddenly re-enter our lives, but in a much more perfect, much more ideal, or better said, in an upgraded form that we can use practically. So if it's a relationship or a friendship, for example, well, then there the bridges are going to be rebuilt and are going to be rebuilt to last for a long time. But this can also play out in a totally opposite way, where there's some, for example, soul contracts that we have in our lives, but they are no longer useful, they're no longer relevant, they're no longer working, and this energy can offer us the chance to break them in a very ideal and maybe non-painful way, and that immediately gives us the chance to have something else in our lives for that void, especially that karmic void, to be refilled by a totally new person. So because we have so very many relevant and powerful aspects playing out in the sky during this time of this new moon, it is really advised to just focus as much as we can on ourselves, on the frequency of our thoughts, and if we have some big plans, big goals, this will be a very powerful time to plant seeds of new intentions into the universe, to focus, and of course, to be very down to earth, to be very realistic. Optimism, pessimism, dreamy state, wishful thinking, naivety and idealism is definitely not advised. This is where, we have to use the power of the Saturn retrograde in Aquarius and just embody our distinctiveness, embody our uniqueness, embody the position that we hold in society, in our collective, and just use everything as ingeniously, as intelligently as we possibly can to enable that fantastic new beginning to enter our lives, no matter what form, shape, or manifestation it will take. Now, on the world stage, this energy can play out as new ideas, new solutions, new plans, new scientific research, new communication, new groups being formed, new organizations being formed, for example, to help the global situation, help the coronavirus. This can also represent new inventions seeing daylights, and most importantly, a massive upgrade, at least a plan to upgrade our education systems, the way we teach children, the way people learn. And this doesn't necessarily have to be just about children. This can represent any kind of education, even courses, even learning, even training, even retraining. It can be absolutely anything which has to do with the intellect, with learning, plans, ideas, and connections. And also, since the North Node is also here in this part of the sky in Gemini, well, this can also represent the power of the people, the power of the masses, many, many minds and wills working as one. And this is where maybe centralized power and authorities and our leaders have no choice but to take very, very seriously into consideration whatever the masses desire, whatever the masses wish, however the masses plan to solve this situation, even if the plans of the masses and the views and visions of the masses do not resonate with their own. So this will be a very powerful confrontation of two different intellectual perspectives on how to solve the problem and how to achieve significant progress and evolution ultimately. Thank you so much for listening. Wish everyone a very happy and a very potent new moon, so that the new beginning that it creates in your life is absolutely going to align you with your truest, most authentic, and most unique version, where you can accomplish your goals and dreams, everything that you wish to experience in the future. Until next time, bye for now.